So, dear students, will now be having a discussion of the summary of this entire chapter, mineral nutrition. So, we have already discussed about mineral nutrients, how the essential mineral elements, they are of two types, the micronutrients and macronutrients. So, the classification of them, the deficiency symptoms, and we also discussed about the uh, nitrogen cycle and nitrogen metabolism, how exactly it is happening. We have discussed about that in this particular chapter. So let us have a summary of this entire chapter at present. See, all organisms, they are requiring macromolecules, carbohydrates, proteins, fats, etc., and water and minerals for growth and development. Even human beings, we require seven essential nutrients are required. So they are the carbohydrates, proteins. Carbohydrates is 60%, proteins is 15%, fat is 15%, then vital amino acids or vitamins we call it as, or vital amino acids. Then we also require mineral salts, fibers, water. So the seven essential elements that we require for a balanced diet. Similar to that, for a plant to have a healthy growth and development and flowering to take place, they also require this macromolecules and micromolecules to be present in proper concentration. So deficiency of any mineral nutrient or excess of any mineral nutrient, it can also lead to toxicity. The deficiency leads to deficiency symptoms and stunted growth, chlorosis, necrosis. These are all the symptoms of deficiency, symptoms of the mineral nutrients. So we should, the plant also require macromolecules as well as this water and minerals in proper concentration for their growth and development. So their growth and development will be affected in case if they don't get these nutrients through the soil in a proper proportion. So that is what is the important aspect of mineral nutrients in the normal growth and development of plant. So we discussed about hydroponics. So it is the technique of growing plant in a defined nutrient solution without soil. So I've already shown you this apparatus where all the air plugs are blocked using cotton, and we have this funnel for adding water and nutrients. We are using a aerating tube for the entry of oxygen so that the roots get aeration. Okay, and the plant is also placed within this through a cotton plug. So the plant doesn't have soil, it has a nutrient soil. The roots are exposed to the nutrient soil, similar to the nutrients that the soil would have provided. So this is a typical setup of nutrient solution culture. So the hydroponics, so the technique of growing plants in defined nutrient solution without soil, we call it as hydroponic. So the technique of growing plants in a defined nutrient solution that is without soil, we call it as hydroponics. So it was demonstrated by Julius von Sachs. So was a German biologist in 1860. So long back he had demonstrated this hydroponics. So Julius von Sachs had demonstrated this hydroponics in 1860. So the nutrient solution is aerated, that is, it is supplied with oxygen for optimum growth. So because even the roots require oxygen for their respiration. So the nutrient solution is aerated for their optimum growth. So here another apparatus to show the hydroponics culture. So the hydroponics initially was used to identify essential elements that were required for plants and their deficiency symptoms. So if you have to study deficiency symptoms, it is very difficult for you to deprive a nutrient in the soil. Okay, but you can do the same in the hydroponics. So hydroponics was used to identify essential elements required for plants and their absence, which cause the deficiency symptoms. So in this hydroponics, the plant roots were immersed in nutrient solution. Okay, and an element was added or removed or given in varied concentration. That is how the experiments were done to identify the essential elements that were required for the plants. They were either added or removed or given in different concentration. Okay, hydroponics is presently used for commercial production of vegetables like tomato, seedless cucumber, lettuce. They are all obtained through this hydroponics. So hydroponics at present, it is used for commercial production of vegetables like tomato, seedless cucumber, lettuce, etc. So the essential mineral elements. So you can notice this essential mineral elements in a soil. Okay, so that is responsible for the healthy growth and development of a plant. So the essential mineral elements, we'll be trying to study about them. What are the micronutrients and macronutrients required for a plant? So the essential mineral elements, there are more than 60 elements are found in different plants. It is not in one plant. Different plants, they have exhibited nearly 60 different elements are found in different plants. Some of the plant species accumulate selenium, gold, and others. So the some of the plant species have that ability to accumulate selenium, gold, and other minerals also. Some plants which are growing near the nuclear test sites, they take up this radioactive strontium. So they can be used for removing the radioactive materials from the soil. See, the heavy metals are also absorbed by this uh, the cabbage, so they can absorb this heavy materials, as well as cauliflowers. They have that ability to absorb heavy materials from the soil. So if you want to clear soil from the pollutants, so you can use these plants, you can grow them up and use them to remove this heavy metals and other pollutants. So some of the plants are growing near nuclear test sites. They have shown that they can take up radioactive strontium. Okay. So there are techniques to detect minerals even at a very low concentration, that is 10 to the power of minus 8 gram per ml. So such low concentration, 10 to the power of minus 8 gram per ml. So these minerals can also be detected through this. Uh, there are techniques to detect them even at a very low concentration of 10 to the power of minus 8 gram per ml. So these are some important points that you can remember about. So more than 60 elements are found in different plants. Some of the plant species have that ability to accumulate selenium, gold, etc. Some plants are growing near the which are growing near the nuclear test sites, take up radioactive strontium, so they can be used to remove the radioactive materials. So there are techniques to detect minerals even at a very low concentration of 10 to the power of minus 8 gram per ml. See the criteria, whenever you have to say an element is essential mineral element, so there should be some criteria or parameter to call them as an essential element. So those parameters are discussed now. See, an element must be needed for normal growth and reproduction. In the absence of that element, the plant should not be able to complete their life cycle or set seeds. See, if any element has to be considered as a essential element, they should be required for the normal growth and reproduction of plant. In absence of this element, the plants would not be in capability to complete their life cycle or onset of seeds. Only then we consider that element to be essential element. So the requirement of an element must be very specific. That is, deficiency of an element cannot be replaced by another element. So they should be very specific. Without that element, so the plant would be affected and it is irreplaceable by other elements. So the requirement of an element must be specific, and deficiency of that element cannot be compensated by another element. So only then we can call them as an essential element. The essential element should be directly involved in the plant metabolism. So the essential element should be directly involved in the plant mechanism metabolism. Only 17 elements are absolutely essential for plant growth and metabolism. Even though we said that they have discovered around 60 elements in different plants for normal plant growth, reproduction, and metabolism, 17 elements are absolutely essential. So what are those? You can see here NPK. I've always told you to remember this NPK: nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. Then magnesium, the sulfur, calcium. There is boron, chlorine, manganese, iron, nickel, copper, zinc, molybdenum, HCO, that is the hydrogen, carbon, and oxygen. So the hydrocarbons. So these are the 17 elements that you can remember about. So 10, 4 plus 3, 17 elements you can see here. So these are the 17 elements which are absolutely essential for plant growth and metabolism. So based on their quantitative requirements, some of them are required in large quantity, some of them are required in very less quantity. So the essential elements are of two types. Based on the quantitative requirements of plants, the essential elements are of two types: the macronutrients and micronutrients. Okay, so the macro and micronutrients, we have it here. So what you can understand here is it's very easy to remember the different macronutrients. See, the non-mineral nutrients that are required by the plants are carbon, hydrogen, oxygen. Non-mineral nutrients that are required by plants, which are essential elements, are CHO. You can remember carbon, hydrogen, oxygen. The mineral nutrients are NPK. You can remember it as nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium. These are the primary macronutrients: NPK, nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. The secondary macronutrients are calcium, magnesium, and sulfur. See, the magnesium is required for Mg. Magnesium is required for the synthesis of chlorophyll. They are the important component of the ring structure of chlorophyll. So magnesium. So calcium, magnesium, and sulfur, they are the secondary macronutrients. The other micronutrients are chlorine, boron, then there would be uh, copper, iron, manganese, molybdenum, silicon, sodium, zinc. They are all the other micronutrients: boron, chlorine, copper, iron, manganese, molybdenum, silicon, sodium, zinc. They are the other micronutrients. So macronutrients, we have a list of them, like carbon, higher CHO, NPK. You can easily remember them. Then you have to remember calcium, magnesium, that is Mg, and you have to remember sulfur. So carbon, hydrogen, oxygen. NPK is nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium. Then you have the calcium, magnesium, and sulfur. Okay, so the macronutrients, if we have to call them as micronutrients, they are present in plant tissues in large amounts. That is, they are macronutrients are more than 10 meter mole per kg. Okay, so they are 10, uh, I think probably the micromole, not meter, 10 micromole per kg of dry matter. So if they are present more than 10 micromole per kg of dry matter, we call them as uh, macronutrients greater than 10 micromole per kg of dry matter. So we call them as macronutrients. So the macronutrients include the non-minerals like CHO, then minerals like NPK, then we have the other minerals like calcium, magnesium, and sulfur. So these are the uh, macronutrients. Carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen are mainly obtained from carbon dioxide and water. Others are all absorbed from the soil as mineral nutrition. Okay, so the other elements like NPK, calcium, magnesium, sulfur, they're all absorbed from the soil as mineral nutrients. So only carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen are obtained from carbon dioxide and water, whereas the remaining mineral nutrients are obtained from the soil as mineral nutrients. Remaining elements are obtained from the soil as mineral nutrients. So the micronutrients, they'll be having uh, the they are needed in very small amounts, that is lesser than 10 micromole per kg of dry matter. So the micronutrients are required in very small amounts, that is, they are less than 10 micromole per kg of dry matter. So they include, so the micronutrients include iron, manganese, copper, molybdenum, zinc, boron, chlorine, and nickel. So the micronutrients include iron, manganese, copper, molybdenum, zinc, boron, chlorine, and nickel. So these are the micronutrients. For higher plants, there are some other elements required such as sodium, silicon, cobalt, and selenium. For the higher plants, there are some other elements which are required such as sodium, silicon, cobalt, and selenium. See the micronutrients for higher plants, there are some other elements required apart from these micronutrients. They require sodium, silicon, cobalt, and selenium. So the essential mineral nutrients. So if you look into them, they're based on function. The essential uh, micronutrients or elements, they are of four categories. The essential elements are of four categories. That is the components of biomolecules based on their function. So they can be the components of biomolecules and structural elements of cells. Example, CHON. You can remember it as CHON. They are the components of biomolecules and structural elements of cells like carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, and nitrogen. So they are going to be the components of biomolecules and structural elements of the components of the cell. The components of energy related chemical compounds like ATP, adenosine triphosphate. Example, the magnesium in chlorophyll and phosphorus in ATP. So the components of energy related chemical compounds like magnesium in chlorophyll and phosphorus in ATP. So they are made up of this essential elements. So the third one is elements that activate or inhibit enzymes. So there are elements which are going to activate or they are going to prevent the enzyme activity. So the elements that activate or inhibit enzyme action or enzyme activity. So like magnesium, Mg plus is an activator for Rubisco and phosphoenol pyruvate carboxylase, or you can also call it as PEP carboxylase. So they can uh, be an activator for Rubisco, that is ribulose biphosphate carboxylase oxygenase enzyme. Rubisco is in C3 plants, carbon dioxide is fixed by this Rubisco, ribulose biphosphate carboxylase oxygenase enzyme. And in C4 plants, the carbon dioxide is fixed by primary fixer of carbon dioxide is PEP carboxylase, that is phosphoenol pyruvate carboxylase. So they are all very critical enzymes in photosynthetic carbon fixation. So in the next chapter, when we are studying photosynthesis on Monday, so you'll be understanding about the importance of these enzymes in fixing the carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. Zinc is an activator of Zn2 plus is an activator of alcohol dehydrogenase and also molybdenum of nitrogenase during nitrogen metabolism. So zinc is an activator of alcohol dehydrogenase and molybdenum is an activator of nitrogenase during nitrogen metabolism. So these are the like enzyme activator. It can be uh, or inhibitor. That is also the other aspect of it. So the fourth property of mineral elements based on their function is elements that alter the osmotic potential of a cell. especially the opening and closing of the guard cells, the opening and closing of stoma due to the activity of guard cells is because of influx of potassium ions and efflux of potassium ions. So that itself, so whenever potassium ion is present in the cell, the guard cell, they change their osmotic potential. Whenever the potassium ion is absent from the guard cell, they change the osmotic potential. So elements that alter the osmotic potential of a cell by their presence or absence is also another, the last category of this uh, mineral elements based on their function. Like potassium ion, by their influx and efflux, they help in opening and closing of stomata. So remember these four categories of essential elements based on their function. So they can be as components of biomolecules and structural elements of cells. They can be components of energy related chemical compounds. They can be elements that activate or inhibit enzymes, then elements that alter the osmotic potential of a cell. So these are the four properties of the essential mineral elements. The role of macro and micronutrients. Okay, so what is their role? So the essential elements have a role in metabolic processes like permeability of cell membrane. So they have this metabolic process like permeability of cell membrane. So the maintenance of osmotic concentration of cell sap, all these are because of the macro and micronutrients. So maintenance of osmotic concentration of the cell sap, electron transport systems. So the uh, iron is ferrous and ferric, cuprous, copper ion is also involved in electron transport systems. The buffering action, so that is also involving, it is one of the role of macro and micronutrients. Enzymatic activity is also a role of macro and micronutrients. The constituents of macromolecules and coenzymes, they are also the role of macro and micronutrients. So the constituents of macromolecules and coenzymes, they are also one of the role of macro and micronutrients. Let us discuss each of these mineral elements in detail, like nitrogen. See, nitrogen plays an important role. They are found in the amino acids, they are found in the nucleic acid, nucleotides, they are made up of nitrogen bases. So the plants are going to absorb the nitrogen as nitrate ions. Okay, so there are a lot of such features of nitrate and ammonium ions. The plants can absorb nitrogen as they cannot directly fix the free atmospheric nitrogen. So it is very, very important essential element like NPK, or in that nitrogen is the first element. This is required by the plants in the greatest amount. So because it is a macronutrient, they are required by the plant in their greater amount nitrogen. It is absorbed mainly by the plants as nitrate. Some of them are also taken as nitrite or ammonium ion. So very few plants take up these mineral nutrients as nitrite and ammonium ion. Okay, the functions of nitrogen are, it is essential for all the plant parts, mainly meristematic tissues. They require the nitrogen, and metabolically active cells, they require nitrogen. The second aspect is it is a major constituent of amino acids, proteins, nucleic acids, chlorophyll, vitamins, that is the vital amino acids and hormones. They are the major component of it. Nitrogen is a major component of all these elements like amino acids, proteins, nucleic acids, chlorophyll, vitamins, and hormones. They all have nitrogen, and nitrogen is a major constituent of these compounds. The next one is phosphorus. You know that even in the nucleotide, nucleoside, so they have this nucleotide will be having the phosphate group. So the phosphorus exists as phosphate ions as H2PO4 minus, or they also exist as HPO4. 2 minus. The function of phosphorus are, it is a constituent of cell membrane. Certain proteins, all nucleic acid and nucleotides, they have this phosphorus. It is required for all the phosphorylation reaction. See, phosphorus is required for all the phosphorylation reactions. So like synthesis of ATP is phosphorylation reaction. We'll be studying in photosynthesis, cyclic photophosphorylation, non-cyclic photophosphorylation, and in respiration, we'll be studying about oxidative phosphorylation. Okay, so the phosphorus is a very, very essential mineral element. It is absorbed by the plants in the form of phosphate ions as HP, H2PO4 minus or HPO4 2 minus. Okay, the functions of this phosphate phosphorus are, it is a constituent of cell membrane. You know that the fluid mosaic model of plasma membrane, we discussed that it is made up of phospholipid bilayer. Biphospholipid layer they are made up of. So it is an important component of the cell membrane. Certain proteins also have phosphorus. All nucleic acids and nucleotides they have phosphorus. So phosphorus is required for all phosphorylation reactions. So phosphorus is required for all phosphorylation reactions. Then potassium. See, potassium is absorbed as potassium ion, K plus. It is highly required in meristem, buds, leaves, and root tips. See, it is potassium is absorbed as potassium ion or K plus from the soil. It is highly required in meristem, buds, leaves, and root tips. So meristem, buds, leaves, and root tips, they require this potassium ion. So what is the function of potassium ion? It maintains an anion cation balance in cells. It changes the osmotic potential of guard cells, that also you can remember. So it maintains an anion cation balance in cell, potassium ion, either by their entry or exit, they maintain an anion cation balance in cell. So this potassium is involved in protein synthesis. It is also involved in opening and closing of stomata. Activation of enzymes is brought about by potassium ions, and also in the maintenance of turgidity of cells. So potassium ion maintains an important role in the turgidity of the cell. You can remember the turgidity of the guard cells by its entry and exit. Potassium ion maintains the turgidity of cells. So by its entry, they maintain the turgidity of the cell. So you can remember these are the important functions of potassium ion. Then we had discussed about calcium. So how calcium forms an important component of middle lamella, the calcium pectate. See, calcium is absorbed from the soil as calcium ions, that is Ca2 plus. It is required by meristematic and differentiating tissues. See, calcium ion is required by meristematic and differentiating tissues. Okay, so it is accumulating in the older leaves, remobilization. So calcium ion is also accumulating in the older leaves. The function of calcium ions are, during cell division, it is used in the synthesis of cell wall. Calcium ion is used in the synthesis of cell wall, particularly calcium pectate in middle lamella. So it also is needed during the formation of mitotic spindle. Calcium ions are also required in the formation of mitotic spindle. For normal functioning of the cell membranes, calcium ions are required. So that is also another aspect of it. So calcium ions activate certain enzymes and plays an important role in regulating metabolic activities. So the calcium ion, they activate the certain enzymes and they play an important role in regulating or controlling the metabolic activities. So you should also remember that they activate certain enzymes and play an important role in regulating the metabolic activities, that is controlling the metabolic activities. So magnesium ion, Mg, so they are an important part of the ring of chlorophyll. So they part an important ion of the ring of chlorophyll. See, magnesium is absorbed by plants as divalent, Mg2+. So the functions of magnesium are, So it activates enzymes of respiration and photosynthesis. So very important function. The activating the enzymes of respiration and photosynthesis, that is Mg2 plus. Then second aspect is it is involved in the synthesis of DNA and RNA. So the magnesium ion is involved in the synthesis of DNA and RNA. Very important. Again, it is an important constituent of the ring structure of chlorophyll, and magnesium helps to maintain ribosome structure. Very, very important features are noticed by this magnesium uh, as a macronutrient. So it activates the enzymes of respiration and photosynthesis. It is involved in the synthesis of DNA and RNA. So magnesium is also involved as a constituent of the ring of chlorophyll, ring structure of chlorophyll. It magnesium also maintains the ribosome structure. So this is the important function of magnesium, which is a macronutrient. Sulfur is also a macronutrient. The plant they are going to absorb sulfur as sulfate. So they are present in two amino acids, sulfur, cysteine and methionine. So cysteine and methionine, they are having this sulfur. Okay, sulfur is taken up by the plants as sulfate ions. So function of sulfur is it is a constituent of several coenzymes, vitamins like thiamine, biotin, coenzyme A. So they are a constituent of this important constituent of several enzymes. So next is iron. So iron plays an important role. Plants obtain iron as ferric ions, that is Fe3 plus. So it is required in larger amount in comparison to other micronutrients. So iron is also a micronutrient, but when compared to other micronutrients, they are required in a larger amount because especially in the terminal oxidation or electron transport system or electron transport chain, iron, so they undergo from ferrous to ferric. So there is a transformation, and this cycle they are involved there. Okay, so the function of this ferric ion is it is main constituent of proteins involved in the transfer of electrons like ferredoxin and cytochromes. So it is a main constituent of proteins which are involved in the transfer of electrons. Examples of this iron being involved in the uh, proteins are ferredoxin and cytochromes. So it is reversibly obtained from ferrous to ferric during electron transfer. So it is reversibly oxidized from ferrous. Oxidized is what? Oil is loss of electron. Reduction is gain of electron. So it is reversibly oxidized from ferrous Fe2 plus to Fe3 plus during electron transfer. It activates catalase enzyme. So iron is going to activate catalase enzyme and is essential for the formation of chlorophyll. So iron is very, very essential for the formation of chlorophyll. Just as much important magnesium is, iron is also important for the formation of chlorophyll. Manganese, Mn. It is absorbed as manganese ions, that is Mn2 plus. It activates many enzymes similar to magnesium. Manganese also activates enzymes involved in photosynthesis, respiration, and nitrogen metabolism. The best defined function of manganese ion is the photolysis of water to liberate oxygen during photosynthesis. So one of the important function of manganese Mn is splitting up of water or photolysis of water to liberate oxygen during this photosynthesis. So the important function of manganese is splitting up of water to liberate oxygen during photosynthesis. Then we had discussed about zinc. So plants obtain zinc as Zn2 plus ions. The functions of zinc is it activates enzyme, especially carboxylases, Rubisco, PEP carboxylase. They are all activated by this zinc ions. It is needed in the synthesis of oxygen. Zinc is needed aid in the synthesis of oxens. Copper is going to be absorbed as cupric ions, that is Cu2 plus. The functions of copper are it is essential for the overall metabolism in plants. So copper plays an important role. So it is absorbed as cupric ions from soil. So like iron, cupric ion is associated with some enzymes in redox reaction and is reversibly oxidized from cuprous to cupric ions. So that is one more function of this. So they are reversibly oxidized from uh, cuprous to cupric ion. So remember this function of copper. So it is associated with some of the redox reaction and is reversibly oxidized from cuprous to cupric ions. It is essential for the overall metabolism in plants, cupric ions. Boron, it is absorbed as borate, that is BO3 3 minus or B4O7 2 minus. So functions of boron is it is required for uptake and utilization of calcium ions. Then membrane functioning, boron is required. The pollen grain germination, boron is very much important, uh, especially in the experiments in order to germinate the pollen grain on stigma. We use this boron even in our labs. So boron plays an important role in pollen germination, cell elongation, cell differentiation, carbohydrate translocation. They are brought about by boron. So boron, even though it's a micronutrient, it has some of these important features like uptake and utilization of calcium ions, membrane functioning. Boron plays an important role in membrane functioning. Boron is also required for the pollen germination, cell elongation, cell differentiation, and carbohydrate translocation. They are brought about by boron. See, plants obtain molybdenum as molybdate ions. So molybdenum is obtained from plants as molybdate ions, that is MoO2 2 plus. The functions of molybdenum are it is a component of many enzymes such as nitrogenase and nitrate reductase. So it is one of the component of enzymes like nitrogenase and nitrate reductase. These enzymes participate in nitrogen metabolism. So nitrogenase and nitrate reductase have molybdenum as a component. So chlorine, it is absorbed as chloride ion, Cl minus. So the functions of chlorine are along with sodium ions and potassium ions. It helps in determining the solute concentration and the anion cation balance in cells is maintained by the chloride ion along with sodium and potassium ion. So chlorine is essential for the water splitting reaction in photosynthesis that leads to evolution of oxygen. So manganese also takes place there, as well as chlorine is also involved in the water splitting reaction in photosynthesis, which leads to the liberation of oxygen. Now, there are various deficiency symptoms of the essential elements. The deficiency of an essential element, they cause stunted plant growth or retarded plant growth or dwarf plant growth, you can see. So the deficiency of an essential element, it is going to lead to retarded plant growth or stunted plant growth. So concentration of an essential element below which the plant growth is stunted or retarded, we call it as critical concentration. The element is said to be deficient when they are present below the critical concentration. So the morphological changes due to deficiency or absence of an element, we call it as deficiency symptoms. The morphological changes due to deficiency or absence of an element, we call it as deficiency symptoms. So the deficiency symptoms of essential elements are, so deficiency symptoms, they vary from element to element. The plant part that shows the deficiency symptoms depends on the mobility of the element. Okay. For elements that are actively mobilized and exported to young developing tissues, the deficiency symptoms appear first in the older leaves. Example deficiency symptoms of the nitrogen, potassium, and magnesium are visible first in the senescent leaves because they are actively mobilized. In older leaves, biomolecules containing these elements are broken down. It makes these elements available for mobilizing to younger leaves. If the elements are relatively immobile and are not transported out of the mature organs, the deficiency symptoms appears first in the young tissues. Example, sulfur and calcium are part of the structural component of the cell and hence are not easily released. So the deficiency symptoms of sulfur and calcium is first seen in the young leaves. This aspect of mineral nutrition has a great significance in agriculture and horticulture. What are the deficiency symptoms that we can notice? Deficiency symptoms of essential elements are chlorosis, necrosis, stunted growth, premature fall of flowers, leaves, and buds, and prevention of cell division. So these are all the deficiency symptoms. Chlorosis, that is degradation of chlorophyll, necrosis, uh, death of tissues, water soaked dead tissues, water soaked dead tissues, stunted growth, premature fall of leaves and buds, and there is also inhibition of cell division. That is also going to be one of the deficiency symptom of essential elements. So chlorosis is the loss of chlorophyll leading to yellowing in leaves. You can notice this yellowed up leaves. It is due to the deficiency of elements like uh, nitrogen, potassium, magnesium, sulfur, then iron, manganese, zinc, and molybdenum. Necrosis, the death of tissue, particularly leaf tissue, it is due to the deficiency of calcium, magnesium, copper, and potassium ions. So lack or low level of nitrogen, potassium, sulfur, and molybdenum, they inhibit cell division. Low concentration of nitrogen, sulfur, molybdenum, they delay flowering. So nitrogen, sulfur, and molybdenum, they delay flowering. So this is asked as a CET question also. I had discussed it in the previous class. So the deficiency symptoms of essential elements are, so deficiency of different elements, they may cause different types of symptoms. To identify the deficient elements, all the symptoms have to be studied. You can't uh, identify an element to be deficient by just one symptom. All the symptoms have to be studied. Also, different plants respond differently to the deficiency of the same element. That is also to be taken note of. So different plants respond differently to the deficiency of the same element. So the next concept that we had studied is toxicity of micronutrients. A moderate increase in micronutrients, they cause toxicity in plants. A moderate increase in micronutrients, they cause toxicity in plants. Any mineral ion concentration in tissues that reduces the dry weight of tissues by about 10% is considered to be toxic. Any mineral ion concentration in tissues that reduces the dry weight of tissues by about 10% is considered to be toxic. Such critical concentrations, they vary widely among different micronutrients. If any mineral ion concentration in tissues brings down the dry weight of tissues by 10%, we consider that element concentration to be toxic. Such critical concentrations vary widely among different micronutrients. The toxicity symptoms are difficult to identify. Toxicity levels for an element also vary for different plants. So the toxicity symptoms are difficult to identify. The toxicity levels for an element also vary for different plants. Excess of an element may inhibit the uptake of another element. Example, excess of manganese, they induce deficiency of iron, magnesium, and calcium. Just the presence of manganese, excess presence of manganese, they cause deficiency of iron, magnesium, and calcium. So they inhibit the uptake of these elements and cause their deficiency. So because manganese competes with iron and magnesium for uptake and with magnesium for also binding with enzyme, manganese also inhibits calcium translocation in shoot apex. The symptoms of manganese toxicity may actually be the deficiency symptoms of iron, magnesium, and calcium. Okay. The main symptoms of manganese toxicity is the appearance of brown spots surrounded by chlorotic veins. So the appearance of manganese toxicity is the symptom is brown spots surrounded by chlorotic veins. The next one is the mechanism of absorption of elements. So what is the mechanism that is noticed in absorption of elements? So we already know that the elements are absorbed by the xylem along with the transport of water. So along with the ascent of sap, the mineral ions are also taken up by these xylem vessels. So we know about that. So the inward movement of ions into cells is called influx, and the outward movement of ions from the cells is called as efflux. So the inward movement of ions into cells, we call it as influx, and the outward movement of ions from the cells, we call it as efflux. So the process of absorption includes two phases. The first phase is initial rapid and passive uptake of ions into the apoplast. So the initial rapid and passive uptake of ions into the apoplast. So there is a bulk flow, isn't it? So apoplast is through the non-living components of the cell, like cell wall, intercellular spaces. They are going to bulk flow of water with mineral ions. They are going to take place. So the initial uptake of mineral ions is by the apoplast. So it usually occurs through ion channels, that is the transmembrane proteins that function as selective pores. The second phase, the ions are taken in slowly into the symplast through the endodermal cells. It is through the symplast, inner space or cytoplasm of the cells. So it is an active process. First phase is a uh, passive process and it is through apoplast pathway. Second phase is through the symplast, that is in between the cytoplasm of the cells by plasmodesmatal connection. And second phase is an active process. So the mineral salts are translocated through the xylem along with the ascending stream of water. The proof for transport of mineral salts through xylem is analysis of the xylem sap. It shows that they have mineral salts in it. Use of radioisotopes of mineral elements. So you can find that radiation is emitted from the xylem sap. This itself is a proof for transport of mineral salts through the xylem. So analysis of the xylem sap, it shows the presence of mineral salts. Second one is the use of radioisotopes of gem mineral elements. That itself also indicates the presence of minerals in the xylem sap. So they emit radiation, so we can easily identify that mineral elements are transported through the xylem sap. So soil as a reservoir, it's a storehouse of essential elements. The weathering and breaking down of rocks enrich the soil with. The weathering can happen through rain, okay, wherein the rainwater, when it flows through the mountains and boulders, the minerals are going to dissolve in water. So, or breakdown of rocks, when boulders they roll down from the mountains, they break down into small particles. So the weathering and breakdown of rocks, they are going to enrich the soil with dissolved ions and inorganic salts. What are the roles of soil? See, soil supplies minerals and holds water. So soil is going to supply mineral and it holds water. It harbors nitrogen fixing bacteria and other microbes. So what these are all the components that you find in soil. So they are going to supply minerals, they have water in its soil, they also have microorganisms which fix the nitrogen, and it also supplies air to the roots. See, there is aeration even in soil. It acts as a matrix that stabilizes the plant. So the soil also acts as a matrix which stabilizes the plant. So deficiency of essential mineral affects the crop yield. So fertilizers should be supplied, both macronutrients and micronutrient forms, components of fertilizers. The metabolism of nitrogen is the next topic that we had discussed, and the backdrop slide I showed you, this is a root nodules in a leguminous plants. You can notice the swollen structures. When you take a dissection of it, you find the rhizobium bacteria would be present here. So they help in fixing the atmospheric nitrogen as ammonium ions. Now, nitrogen cycle, if you look, nitrogen is nearly 71% is found in the atmosphere. So nitrogen is the most prevalent element in any living organism. So plants compete with microbes for the limited nitrogen that is available in soil. So the roots of the plants, they have to compete with microorganisms in absorbing the nitrogen. Thus, nitrogen is a limiting nutrient not only for natural ecosystem but also for agricultural ecosystem. So if nitrogen is not present in the soil, then the yield would be affected in the agricultural ecosystem. The biodiversity would be affected in the nature. So the nitrogen is the most important and prevalent element in the living organism. So how is this nitrogen fixed into the soil? So whenever there is lightning, so they are by this physical process, they are going to fix the nitrogen into the soil. Okay, UV radiations are also going to help in fixing the nitrogen to the soil. Then the nitrogen is fixed into the soil by the uh, various bacterias. Okay, the free living bacteria as well as the symbiotic bacteria. So we call it as biological nitrogen fixation. So there is a nitrogen cycle that is taking place, and that is how the nitrogen cycle takes place. So the process of conversion of nitrogen, that is N triple bond N. Nitrogen is a diatomic molecule similar to oxygen. So the process of conversion of nitrogen to ammonia is termed as nitrogen fixation. So the lightning and ultraviolet radiation, they provide energy to convert nitrogen to the oxides of nitrogen, that is nitrogen oxides, that is nitrogen monoxide, nitrogen dioxide, nitrous oxide. So these are all going to be formed by absorbing energy from lightning and UV radiation. So nitrogen is converted to oxides of nitrogen, that is nitrogen monoxide, nitrogen dioxide, nitrous oxide. So the industrial combustion, like forest fire, automobile exhaust, power generating stations, they are also source of the atmospheric nitrogen oxides. So they are all the other sources of atmospheric nitrogen oxides. Industrial combustion, forest fires, the automobile exhausts, and power generating stations, they are also source of atmospheric nitrogen oxides. So the decomposition of organic nitrogen of dead plants and animals into ammonia is called ammonification. So the decomposition, the breakdown of dead components of plants and animals into ammonia is called as ammonification. Some of this ammonia volatilizes and they re-enter into the atmosphere, but most of this ammonia is oxidized into nitrate by soil nitrifying bacteria like Nitrosomonas, Nitrococcus, and Nitrobacter. They are going to convert this ammonia into nitrates. Okay, so the Nitrosomonas and Nitrococcus, they are going to convert this ammonia, oxidize ammonia into nitrite. So this nitrite is further oxidized to nitrate by Nitrobacter. So Nitrobacter is going to oxidize nitrite into nitrate. See, NO2 into NO3 minus. So how is this done by the Nitrobacter? So they bring about this process. So this entire process is nothing but so the conversion of this ammonia, oxidification of ammonia, oxidation of ammonia into nitrate by soil nitrifying bacteria. This process is called as nitrification. So plants absorb the nitrate and it is transported to the leaves. In leaves, it is reduced to form ammonia that finally forms the amine group of amino acid. So nitrate present in the soil is also reduced to nitrogen. See, there is also a reverse process. Nitrate can also be converted into nitrogen and liberated into the atmosphere. And we call this process as denitrification. Denitrification is brought about by bacteria like Pseudomonas and Thiobacillus. So Pseudomonas and Thiobacillus, they bring about this denitrification process wherein the nitrate is going to be liberated as free nitrogen by the activity of this bacteria. So this process is called as denitrification, and that is brought about by bacteria like Pseudomonas and Thiobacillus. Remember these two examples which they give it for the NEET examination or for CET. Okay. So the biological nitrogen fixation, how is it taking place? It is a reduction of nitrogen to ammonia by living organisms in presence of nitrogenase enzyme. So very few organisms they can utilize the nitrogen in the form of nitrogen. Very few organisms. Only certain prokaryotic species have the ability to fix they have this nitrogenase enzyme and they can fix this nitrogen. So they are called as nitrogen fixers. So they can convert nitrogen into ammonia since they have this nitrogenase, like blue green algae and bacteria, they have that. So the biological nitrogen fixation. So the nitrogen fixing microbes are of two types. The free living, that is, they are found in the soil, they are not found in symbiotic association. So we call them as free living microbes, Azotobacter and Beijerinck. So they are aerobic microbes. Azotobacter and Beijerinck are aerobic microbes and they are free living. Rhodospirillum and Bacillus, they are anaerobic. Okay. Cyanobacteria such as Anabina and Nostoc, these blue-green algae, so they also bring about biological nitrogen fixation and they are free living. Anabina might be found in some of the roots that we'll discuss later on. So the symbiotic association is rhizobium bacteria is found within the root nodules. So the legume bacteria relationship, if you look into, so most prominent is Rhizobium species. They are rod shaped, that is Bacillus type. They are Rhizobium. They are found in the roots of legumes. So the legumes are alfalfa, sweet clover, sweet pea, lentils, garden pea, broad bean, clover beans. They're all legumes. Okay, Rhizobium is found in this legumes. The most common association on roots is as root nodules. The microbe Frankia also produces nitrogen fixing nodules on the roots of non-leguminous plant, Alnus. Alnus is non-leguminous plant and Frankia is the microbe which is involved in nitrogen fixation in the nodules of the roots of non-albuminous plants, Alnus. So rhizobium and Frankia are free living in soil, but they are symbionts. They can fix atmospheric nitrogen. The central part of nodule is red or pink in color due to leguminous hemoglobin. So why are they red or pink in color? Because of the presence of leguminous hemoglobin, which we also call it as leg hemoglobin. So these diagrams are required whenever you are writing the stages in the nodule formation. See, the rhizobia, they multiply and colonize the surroundings of the roots and gets attached to the epidermal and root hair cells. The root hair curl and the bacteria invade the root hair. So they are going to form an infection thread. So where all of them are going to enter into the cortical cells in a single like a uh, thread like entry is seen. An infection thread is produced carrying the rhizobium bacteria into the root cortex where they initiate the nodule formation, that is root nodule formation. So the bacteria are released from thread into these cortical cells. It leads to differentiation of specialized nitrogen fixing cells. The nodule establishes a direct vascular connection so with the host plant for exchange of nutrients. So the nodule is going to establish a direct connection with the vascular tissue for the exchange of nutrients. The nodule contains the nitrogenase enzyme and leg hemoglobin. What is the nodule containing? Nitrogenase enzyme and leg hemoglobin. See, nitrogenase enzyme is a molybdenum ion protein. So it catalyzes the uh, conversion of atmospheric nitrogen to ammonia. The first stable product of nitrogen fixation is formation of ammonia. Okay, so ammonia synthesis needs high amount of energy. So 8 ATP for each ammonia it is formed. It is obtained from the respiration of the host cells. The host cells, when they respire, they synthesize ATP. So these ATPs are obtained from the host cells by the rhizobium bacteria to fix the atmospheric nitrogen into ammonia. 8 ATPs are required to fix to form 1 ATP. See, 8 ATPs are required to convert nitrogen into one ammonium ion. So 16 ATPs are required to convert or fix nitrogen into two ammonium ions, two ammonia molecules. And nitrogenase is highly sensitive to the molecular oxygen. So it requires anaerobic conditions. That is absence of oxygen. That is what we call it as anaerobic condition to protect from oxygen. So nitrogenase is highly sensitive to oxygen. So for this leg hemoglobin, they act as oxygen scavenger. So they remove all the oxygen. Okay. So leg hemoglobin is the oxygen scavenger. So these microbes live as aerobes under free living condition. Rhizobium live as aerobes under free living conditions where nitrogenase is not operational. But in symbiotic condition, they during nitrogen fixing events, they become anaerobic to protect these nitrogenase enzyme. So fate of ammonia, once the ammonia is formed, so ammonia is protonated to form ammonium ions. See, most of the plants can assimilate nitrate and ammonium ion, but ammonium is quite toxic to plants and so it cannot accumulate them. So in plants, ammonium ion is used to synthesize amino acids by two ways, reductive amination and transamination. So they have obtained the ammonium ions, but ammonium ions cannot be stored because they are toxic to the plants. So these ammonium ions are converted to amino acids by two processes, reductive amination and transamination. So in reductive amination, ammonia reacts with alpha ketoglutaric acid and reduced NADP to form the glutamic acid. In this, ammonia reacts with alpha ketoglutaric acid, this is keto acid, and reduced NADP to form glutamic acid. Okay, so that is how they are forming this amino acid. In transamination, it is a transfer of amino group from one amino acid to the keto group of a keto acid in presence of transaminase enzyme. So in the transamination, as the name indicates, transfer of amino, that is what is transamination. It is the transfer of amino group from one amino acid, which is a donor, to the keto group of a keto acid because they have ketone C double bond O. So in presence of transaminase enzyme, so that is what is transamination. So glutamic acid is the main amino acid from which the transfer of amino group takes place. place and other amino acids are formed through this transamination. So glutamic acid is the main amino acid from which the transfer of amino groups takes place to the keto acid groups and they form different amino acids. See, asparagine and glutamine are two most important amides found in plants. Asparagine and glutamine are two important amides found in plants. They are structural part of proteins. So they are rich in nitrogen also, asparagine and glutamine, when compared to the amino acid, aspartic acid, and glutamic acid. They are very, very rich in nitrogen. So how are this asparagine and glutamine, which are the amides found in plants, formed? They are formed from two amino acids, that is aspartic acid and glutamic acid, by addition of another amino group to each of them. So the hydroxyl part of this acid is replaced by amino radical, that is COOH. OH is replaced by this amino radical. That is how they become much more richer in nitrogen. So since amides contain more nitrogen than the amino acids, so they are transported to other plant parts of the plant via xylem vessels. Since amides are containing more nitrogen than the amino acids, so they are transported to other parts of the plants by the xylem vessels. So than amino acid, amides are better transported. Okay. In addition, along with the transpiration stream, the nodules of some plants like soybean root nodules, so they are going to export the fixed nitrogen as urites. So urites, urea, you have to just remember about. These compounds also have a particularly high nitrogen to carbon ratio. So nitrogen atom numbers will be more than the carbon number. So that is how you notice in case of soybean root nodules, the fixed nitrogen is transported as urites. So these compounds have high nitrogen to carbon ratio. They have more carbon nitrogen than carbon urites. So that completes our summary of this entire topic, that is mineral nutrients. Do you have any doubts or clarification, dear students? You can just inquire me.